topic is all about managing remote teams effectively and how do you get the best out of people. So we've heard a lot. We've heard a lot about trust. Trust works, trust does not work. That's been the debate. That has been a national debate or a global debate during the pandemic. So I thought, why don't we navigate through it? So the very first thing is I'm not going to be using a PowerPoint slide deck. I normally do not use. Today, all the more, there is a reason that I'm not using it because I'm here going to demonstrate to myself and to each one of you whether we really trust this entire process of how this webinar series is happening virtually. I trust everyone here, although videos are off, I trust that the 40 odd people present here are listening to what I'm saying and are absorbing what I'm saying. And I think every one of you also trusts that I'm going to be delivering justice to the topic. So that's going to be a demonstration. At the end of it, we will wrap up. And as I hear comments from you, we'll know whether this experiment has stood testimony to what we're trying to do right now. Okay. So yes, I see some amazing answers from friends, from people that I know. Yes, Sapna, you're awake. Yes, Sahil. Yes, 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 people. Good. So stay awake. So what are we going to do right now is I'm going to pick up stories from around the world where they're looking at some extremely interesting team management and not necessarily from our business world or from our workspaces that are familiar to us, but we'll draw very, very strong parallels. We look at teams which function extremely efficiently and achieve their deliverables, even though they are not sitting and working together. So let's look at some very, very extreme examples. I know we are live, and I know this is going to be recorded. Nevertheless, let's keep aside values for some time, but pick up and look at teams that work very well. We might touch upon certain slightly controversial teams, but nevertheless, we are looking at how the team is working and nothing but just that, right? So let's take an example of the 2611 incident in Mumbai. We have heard Captain Raghuram talk about it in great detail and how passionately he talks about how the whole rescue operations were masterminded and how the Indian Army and the Rapid Action Force and the Black Cat Commandos, they came in at different times and actually did an amazing work at ensuring that loss of life is minimized with the kind of rampage that actually happened and how they were held hostages, but the loss of life was really minimized. And in the end, the 2611 operations is considered one of the best by the military, which happened in a non-war zone. It's really gone on record. What happened in that teamwork? Okay, a lot of there was a plan of action. Team members, the commandos, and the armed forces personnel were all on the task. But the moment they landed here in Mumbai and they took their positions inside Taj, after that, was it really possible for them to huddle together and discuss the next steps? Was it really possible for them to have a coffee machine conversation? Was it really possible for them to crib about their bosses and the extreme unrealistic expectations that are happening from their team leaders? Was it possible for any one of them to take a sutta break? Right? None of this was possible. The sutta break is something I have stolen from another friend of mine, Sahil Nair. I don't know if he's here, but sutta break is one of his favorite phrases, but I thought I'll bring it in. Did any of the commandos, did any of our armed forces personnel who were right there working on that mission critical, did any of them have opportunities to do any of this? No. Yet, that particular incident has been a success story and a great example of how teams can work even when they are not communicating with each other. What is it that worked over there? We all will say trust. That's what we heard throughout the pandemic. Everybody, each one of us, we've all spoken in so many forums. I see Vinay here. Vinay and I have been in so many forums and all the time following each other. And I don't know who else is here. Similarly, other names like Sahil, whom I took. We've all been saying, yes, remote working works. Hi, Vinay, good to see you. And we've also been talking about trust works and trust is the only thing. In fact, I've been a great advocate of trust. Somewhere I was thinking, I'm talking so much about trust. I think it's high time we go and tell people, how do you make trust work? Right? बहुत ज्ञान दे दिया trust. Trust के पीछे क्या है? What is it that drives trust? It's very important. That's why when HRAI approached me for this series, I thought let's pick up trust as a topic and let's go back and check how do we drive trust within teams. So going back to the 2611 episode, what is it that worked amazingly well in that team? Every one of them knew what the outcome was, what the deliverable was. Every one of them was briefed about what the deliverable was. Now, if you list down the deliverables, one was minimize loss of civilian life. That was definitely, I'm sure, was a deliverable. If you listen to Captain Raghuram's talk, you will be able to relate. Minimize loss of life. Okay. Second thing is attack the terrorists and grab every one of them, preferably alive, so that further interrogation can happen. The third thing is ensure that the hostages find freedom ASAP. And all three were non-negotiable outcomes. And the ASAP is absolutely non-negotiable. It did not have the luxury of time to deliver. What happens in our workspace? We have a project that is coming. We have a budget. We have a schedule. We have people who are put on the project. Now, if we were to communicate to everyone, if the leader was to communicate to everyone, this is the desired outcome. This is the product that we want to build. Now, right here, I'm taking an example of an IT company project, okay? This is the product that we want to build for our client. These are the timelines. We do not have luxury of time, whatever it is. And this is the kind of budget. And each one of you knows your role in this entire story. If managers, hi Sahil, good to see you. So if managers are out there telling people that this is how we need to get where we need to get, and each one of you identify your roles and play your role to the best possible extent, you don't need anybody actually micromanaging. What's happening here in the background is the first layer of trust is getting established, right? So in the 2611 case, what really happened is people, each one of them knew what is the end result that they have to achieve as a team. Each one of them knew what are the challenges they are going to face. All this was discussed and deliberated during the briefing. Each one of them knew what risks they are stepping into. Everyone knew that there is a possibility that they might come out dead. But they knew that they have to save every life of a civilian who is trapped there as a hostage. Objective was very clear. Risks were very clear. Timelines were very clear. Timelines was ASAP. That's it. Very clear. Once the team entered the Taj, they were out there on their own, progressing towards the mission. No coffee table, no coffee machine conversation. And like Sahil says, no sutta breaks, right? But they did, and they achieved the mission. Of course, there was loss of life of our heroes, but civilian life was taken care of. So the mission was a very well executed, perfect mission. Although they were all under the same roof, what actually happened was managing the team was very, very remote. It was remotely managed, or rather, there was no micromanagement once the team was in action. Now, if an exercise like that could be executed to perfection, why can't we execute all projects in our comfortable office workspaces or even more comfortable homes? Like I'm sitting on my bed right now and talking. Okay. If we can sit like this in our comfortable spaces, in our actual comfort zones, why is it not possible for projects to be executed? So imagine if there's a project that comes and the project manager tells people that these are things that you have to do, giving people chunks of information and not telling the whole story, then what happens is everybody develops a different big picture. an extrapolation of the chunk of information that he or she has got. So I have a small bit of information as a team member. My colleague next door has another bit of information as a team member. I am assuming that the big picture looks like this. Just like the story of the 6 blind men and the elephant. One blind man happened to get hold of the elephant's tail, and he thought it's a rope. So his description of the elephant was a rope. Another blind man, got hold of the elephant's leg, and he said, this is like a tree trunk. So I'm sure the elephant looks like a tree trunk. And so on. We know the story. It's a very old anecdote. We know that. So if each one of them were assigned to come together and create a kind of a saddle or a seat for the mahout to sit on the elephant, imagine what each one of them would have created had they thought about it individually, had they visualized the customer individually, right? Each one of them would have gone astray. So in an IT product deliverable, if each one of the team members is extrapolating the big picture based on the little bit of information he or she has, you would end up not meeting timelines. Obviously, there would be a budget overshoot. And how? Because the manager at that point, towards the end of when the project needs to be put together, will not be in a position to make a product which is meaningful to the client. What happens here is the manager is assuming that giving everybody the big picture is making himself a little insecure about himself or his own position. That's natural human behavior. We're not used to managing teams like that, because in the year before the last, manager would sit there and people could walk around, people could get together, discuss intermittently and build on the product. But when people are working all over the country, from everywhere, anywhere, working at different time zones, I saw one of the questions which talked about people working in different time zones. It's not possible. So you have to change the way of working and build something called as a shared mental model. What is a shared mental model? It's a very simple terminology, which actually means every participant in the story, every participant in the project, every team member, including the manager, shares a vision, shares what is the ultimate goal. So there's no one there who knows only one part of the story. Everyone knows the destination. Everyone has an idea about roles different people do, and everyone has an idea about how it needs to be done. Now, how do you put a shared mental model to work, especially when people are working remotely, when you have to build trust? There are 3 very simple aspects of a shared mental model. The first aspect is team health. By team health, I'm not talking of wellness. I'm not even talking of mental health. But here what I'm saying is team health is an aspect where the whole team is looked at as an organization. And does the team have the vital statistics in order to be able to deliver the project? Do you have the right team members in place? Do you have people who are committed to it? Now, the role of the manager here, instead of micromanaging and delegating chunks and bits of tasks, the manager has to take a 36,000 feet overview and look at the team, its composition, and how do you need to reconfigure the team slightly to make it multidisciplinary and customer-centric. In a typical IT organization, we have client-centric, client-focused teams. Manufacturing has not really come into that style of working, but that definitely helps, especially when some of the team members work remotely. Even in manufacturing, when it comes to project management, there could be a bunch of people whose roles permit them to work remotely, but they have to deliver to the same customer. They won't be there on the assembly line watching it. So how does one define the team health? Aditi says it's a feeling of we and not I. Yes, Aditi, well taken. But how do we drive the feeling of I? Feeling of we is letting the team know that we are not working as siloed functions or departments. On the other hand, we are working as one team towards one goal. So when we say we are working as one team, it means that our functional goals do not take priority at this point. Priority is delivering to the customer. The second aspect of having a shared mental model is who does what and when. That's precisely when these functional silos, when we get together to form multifunctional, multidisciplinary teams, it's very important for everyone to understand who comes and does his role or her role and when. So for example, if there is a question around a budget overshoot, there is a change request from the customer, and the team that is delivering needs to do a small change in the code that they're writing or whatever they are developing as a product for the customer. Now, the change request means there could be a budget overshoot or there could be a time overshoot. So here, if the team members themselves, within them, there is someone who's an expert in handling the budget, or there is someone who's an expert in managing, who's taking care of project controls, if that team member plays his role with authority and defines and gives a decision, it does not have to wait for the project manager to come into play and give a decision. So what happens is now suppose there is a resource crunch at a particular situation. Now, if there is someone in the team, in the client focused team, in this multidisciplinary team, who understands resource requirements, who understands resource forecasting, who has connections with sources from where you can get these people, okay, that individual will be able to come and play that role and get that position filled quickly. Now, this does not have to wait for the manager to take stock of this, then drop a resource request to HR, then HR gets into action, and then there is a shortlisting of resumes, so on and so forth. That would delay the time and the project would end up getting delayed. So if there are people who are customer centric, if there are teams who are customer centric, consisting of individuals who know their place in the entire ecosystem and together driving the desired results, then that team becomes very easy to manage, even if it is remote, because everybody knows their piece or their role to play in the big picture. Everybody knows the big picture in the first place, and everyone knows when to come and what to do. So this is like a huge symphony orchestra. There are 300 musicians on the stage. Everyone knows what piece of music they're all playing together, but there won't be cacophony if each one knows when he has to play his musical instrument, up to what time, what are the notations, and when he has to collaborate with others. It's as simple as that. The musicians on the stage during a symphony orchestra do not have the luxury of talking to each other, interacting with each other, or giving each other cues. In large orchestra symphonies with 300, 400 people, it doesn't happen. They work purely on an understanding of the big picture and their role in it, and when do they enter and when do they exit. Right? The third aspect of a shared mental model is every individual knowing when to give the next person the cue without that person having to wait for it. So when your role in the piece is finished, it's important that the communication happens at the right time to the others who know that they have to start working from that point. Now, how does this happen? Now, all of this happens when there is communication that is constantly happening between team members in some periodic manner, so that status of the project is clearly communicated to everyone. Now, there are different ways in which teams take communications when it comes to dealing with projects. Agile has several methodologies in itself. So those of you who know Agile will definitely understand the role that a retrospective meeting actually does, the role that a daily stand-up actually does. So you would ask me, how can one do a daily stand-up when teams are working remotely? A daily stand-up is done as much as remotely as possible these days using any of our conferencing tools such as this. The only important thing there is, even if a person does not come on video, it doesn't matter, but as long as the contribution is out there, discussed and deliberated. Because what really happens is, in a daily stand-up meeting, every day, the big picture is revisited. The ultimate goal is revisited. And everyone talks about his or her role in that. There's a reiteration of the health of the team and what role each one has to play. So in that reiteration, what happens is, even if I have missed out delivering what I was to deliver yesterday, in today's daily stand-up, I'm committed to talk about it. That's my role. My role is to let the team know with transparency what went well, what did not go well, what were the behavioral patterns I observed in myself or around me, and what is the help I can seek from others. So when this discussion is on, even if I as a team member has defaulted in a deliverable yesterday, today when I have to talk about it, I would definitely will do some introspections and come back and tell people that these were things that really went well and these were things that went wrong. So when we discuss about things that went wrong, it's not about what was not achieved. It's not about the gaps in the deliverables. It's about taking a step behind that and trying to see what were those drivers which did not allow things to happen in the right way. What were those drivers which were deterrent to things getting done the right way? Now, when you discuss about those drivers which made things go wrong, the very next question you ask yourself or you tell the team in a retrospective meeting is, I observed these patterns of behavior. That's where every team member gets an opportunity to talk about challenges he or she faces while working remotely or in that project or whatever it is. So when challenges are spoken openly, it becomes easier to ask for support. When you ask for support, talking about your challenges, when you make yourself vulnerable, now here there is no hierarchy. Here there is no department superior to another department. There is no importance of individuals. There's nothing. The only thing that the whole team is talking about here is the ultimate deliverable and what role each one of us is playing in that journey. So when you make yourself vulnerable about things that went wrong and the behavioral patterns that you observed yourself to demonstrate, and you seek support, actually there is magic that already happens in the team, and people are more than happy to deliver, to offer their support. And that's how teams that even work remotely actually are able to deliver to timelines. Now, I would like to take a look at some of the questions here, but in the meantime, if anyone wants to unmute and ask a question, feel free to go ahead and do that. One question I got here is, what do we consider the biggest benefits of a remote workforce? I like to start with this question because it's a very positive sounding question. While on one hand, we are all grumbling about remote working becoming difficult and a burnout happening and all of that. I think the biggest benefit of remote workforce is there is, at least in cities like Mumbai, the biggest benefit is you're letting people stay in the work in the comfort of their homes and avoid the stress of commute. That's one benefit. Another big benefit that I see is I came across this very interesting jargon called as pin code hiring. Earlier, when we had to hire people quickly to come on projects, one of the constraints was this project requires long hours of working. So please look at individuals who stay within the same pin code where our office is. So remote working, I think one very big benefit is we're able to hire for skills that a project requires rather than hiring for people who are living in the same pin code. That's another big benefit that I see in remote working, because there are no boundaries. There are many more, but this is something which I would say, these are two things which I would say are really striking benefits according to me. Another question that I got is, what are the main reasons to integrate remote work into the workforce? My understanding of this question is, why did we get into doing remote working as part of our norm? Obviously, we were left with no choice. The person who asked this question, if you want to clarify, I'm open to it. You may stop me and clarify. But to my mind, I think the only reason why remote working had to be integrated into the way we work is we were left with no choice. There was no way that we could get to our workplaces and work. How important is remote work to your business model? I think for any kind of a business model, remote work brings with it a lot of advantages. Overheads are down. Many organizations we know are using this to their advantage to bring down their overhead costs. A lot of rental workspaces that were on lease are all being released. Pin code hiring is disappeared, and you're able to hire for skills. So if you look at it, wherever the business model sees remote working as an advantage, I think it's a huge advantage. So definitely it works and it is here to stay. What does your virtual team do within the company? I didn't understand this question. So anyone who asks this question, if you're around, please unmute and ask. Okay, there is silence. So I assume the person who asked the question is not here. How do you address time zone challenges while remote working? Now, this is another very practical question for which I would like to give a very practical answer. Time zone differences, to my mind, do not necessarily mean if you're living in different geographies. Even biological clock differences should be considered as time zone differences. There are some of us who are nocturnal and whose productivity at work is extremely high when the whole world goes to sleep or this side of the world goes to sleep. Some of us are morning people where we work very, very well early in the morning. And there are many of us who can work in intermittent chunks, cannot sit in one place and work for 4 hours. And there are a few of us like me who can work around the clock if very excited about the work. So all these, to my mind, are new definitions of time zones, not necessarily geographical time zones, but also biological clock time zones. And I think it is important for managers to be conscious of what is the time zone that their team members, each one of them, prefers to work in. And it's important for managers to be able to leverage on those time zone differences within which the team works. Now, I work for an organization which was catering to clients across the globe. So we had projects which were running for a Canadian client. We had projects which were running for a client in the Middle East. We had projects which were running for clients in Australia. Absolutely different time zones. So each team task force used to come or used to work or used to log in from homes at different time zones. They had to. But team members, when they were working on their deliverables, when they were writing their codes or when they were doing the programming or when they were making the drawings, whatever, they were given the freedom to choose a time zone of their choice. Only the team meetings which required everyone to be present was done at a time zone which was mutually acceptable to everybody. But when it came to working, every one of them were given the flexibility to choose the time zone of their choice. Of course, priority was if there has to be an overlap with the client time zone, try to do as much of an overlap so that clarifications, etc., can be sought. So managing time zones is not only about geographical time zones, but also about biological clock time zones. What are the most effective tools for remote team communication? Effective tools for remote team communication. Communication is just communication, isn't it? Why would anyone think of having effective tools? To me, communication is most effective when it is done at the appropriate time, in the appropriate manner, and with transparency, no matter what the tool is. If communication does not happen at an appropriate time, then it's as good as not communicating. I can give you an example of a very critical appointment, of a crucial role in the organization, which was actually promoting somebody internal to that role. That was announced to everyone, and it took even the person who was promoted, even it took that person by shock and not a pleasant surprise. Now, would you call that communication? That's lack of communication, because the communication did not happen at the appropriate time. I think more important than tools of communication, it's important to look at the timing of communication and what is communicated and with what level of transparency. As long as timing and transparency are taken care of, any tool of communication would work. Of course, one has to be conscious of the kind of communication that is acceptable by a client and not. You cannot obviously use tools which are not accepted by a client, because in case you have to later on prove something, it should not put you into more trouble. So that's something that you need to be conscious of. How do we nurture our company's culture in a remote work environment? The answer is very simple. One of my favorite suggestions here is, in order to build trust and transparency for making remote work happen in a productive manner, coach your managers to become facilitators. Managers need to become coaches and facilitators and not dictators. And how do they do that is help and encourage everyone to treat adults as adults. So when I say treating adults as adults, it all comes down to not sitting on a pedestal and dictating terms. It comes to not being defensive of mistakes. It comes to being able to speak openly about where is it that we want to get to. It comes to being open and vulnerable about strengths and weaknesses, even by the managers, so that everyone understands where the health of the team as a team is falling and where we can chip in to stay afloat. Treating adults as adults is the only way to come out with productive solutions in crisis situations. If we wait for delegation, then we're actually playing or operating in a child ego state, waiting for the parent ego state manager to give a delegation, which could eventually end up in delays in delivery. Rather than that, if we start operating in an adult ego state at all times, looking forward to what is the next thing that we should do and voluntarily offering to do the next steps and seeking information rather than waiting for information to come, I think we would all be in the right direction towards having a culture, the appropriate culture for remote working. What challenges have we encountered building remote teams? Now, this is a question I would like to ask the audience. There are lots of messages which are coming in the chat window, and by the time I read it, I think we'll run out of time. So while I read it, I want people in the audience here to unmute yourself and answer this question. What challenges have you encountered while building remote teams? Now, there are still, I'm sure you all would have accomplished and overcome those challenges, but if you still have challenges, I'm happy to help. So please unmute and answer this question. What challenges have you encountered building remote teams?
Hello, ma'am.
Yes, Mahima.
Yeah, so I had a question. While working remotely, as you discussed about the shared mental model, so I had a question regarding that. Whenever we are following a shared mental model, there might be team conflicts due to unfair allocation of the work. So how are we going to avoid those conflicts? Because in my team recently, where I'm working, there has been a lot of conflict around the work allocation, for which there was even the unfair allocation from the managers, and then since being the junior member in the team, I have to listen to everybody being the senior, but still at times it feels like I'm loaded with a lot of work which I shouldn't be, because it is not mine.
Okay,
but then at the end of the day, I have to do that. So how to go about handling those team conflicts? And
okay, so Mahima, here is where the difference is. When you're working in in a team which is working together in an office, physically present, it's very easy to sort out these differences. You can throw your frustration, you can be loud,
Right.
you can shout, you can be nasty, you can be sarcastic, you can do all of that, and you can figure out the best way to have work allocated in a fair manner. The challenge you're saying is because we are working remotely, even if I shout, only my family members are going to hear it. My manager is not going to hear it, right? That's what we're facing now.
Right.
So
Also,
that's
whenever when the shared mental model is being followed, this kind of issue may also come up. So how are we going to overcome that?
Okay. So shared mental model is not something which you can very simply copy paste and continue working the way you're working. That's where the problem is, right? So when when you're using a shared mental model, you have to change the way work delegation happens. You have to change the way work is monitored and measured. You have to change the way communication happens. And that's why I was talking about having these daily stand-ups. So when you do a daily stand-up, when a daily stand-up is facilitated in the correct manner, what happens is work allocation does not happen one way, in a way that the manager wishes it to happen. In a daily stand-up, the manager is expected to play the role of a coach and a facilitator and talk about the deliverables and leave the floor open for individuals to pick up their pieces of role to play. Okay, so the accountability of what role one has to play is shifted to the team members and is not lying with the manager alone. So what happens is team members discuss amongst themselves and offer to take up roles voluntarily. So part of your problem gets solved there, because delegation is not, it's always, it's beautiful to have a structure. It's beautiful to have, every team should have a leader, fine. But the problem is when leadership gets imposed from the top, that's when things turn a little bitter. That's when you start feeling that you've been given too much of work, so on and so forth. But if you're able to have a model where people are free to pick and choose what they can based on what they can deliver or what they think they can deliver, things usually fall into place. Then with a few discussions, a few iterations, job allocation or the task allocation happens. It might sound very simple. You might argue that it's very difficult to do it, but it comes with a little practice. Now, how do you measure whether this is working well or not? I should also tell you that, because you practice this, if it fails, you need to understand how to make it efficient, right? So here is where something called as an after action review works very well. After action review is not a HR management concept. It is something which came during the World War II. Okay. After action review is it's a beautiful procedure where you do a quick check after every action. You do a quick check, take a step, take a look back and see, let the group evaluate the whole thing, do a retrospective or an after action retrospective, let the group do it together and identify what went well, what did not go well, and what is it that they can do as a group. So what happens when you do an AAR periodically? AARs can be done every week, they can be done every fortnight, they can be done monthly, whatever. The frequency depends on the complexity of the project. When you do an AAR, work reallocation automatically happens, because in the AAR, it will be evident if someone is overloaded. And that person will speak it up. Obviously, work reallocation will happen. Why this is not working well nowadays is we get a project, allocation of tasks is done, and then we take a look at it only when we are doing an interim review of the project. An interim review of the project is more like a status update. You're not getting into the nuances of what went wrong and why there was a mismatch or an overload or an unfair distribution of work. But before the status review, if you're periodically getting into the habit of doing an after action retrospective or a daily stand-up, reallocation will constantly happen without even people noticing it. So these are very effective tools of keeping productivity high when you have teams that need to manage themselves, self-managed teams. So remote teams are definitely have to be self-managed, because you don't have a manager sitting there and breathing down your back.
Thank you for the insight. I just had one more query on the same. You just said that there should be a pick and choose model where the team members are allowed to pick and choose. But then if the pick and choose model is adopted, the members will pick the work according to their comfort zone.
Yeah, of course.
And And they won't pick the work that that is time consuming or that requires huge efforts. So then again, there would be a lot of conflicts coming into
What's
picture.
the role of the manager then? The manager is expected to be a coach. The coach knows the strengths and weaknesses of every individual. The coach knows which individual can add value where. The coach is like the captain of the team, right? Which batsman has to go, which bowler has to go. Okay, even though people might have a choice, there can be a discussion with the captain. The captain would send the right person looking at the situations. So the manager has to play the role of a coach and intervene and guide people to make the right choices for the ultimate deliverable, not the right choices for each one's comfort zone. Because the manager's comfort zone is when the project gets delivered. So it's that is why communication is a key factor here. Even when the task allocation happens, communication has to be very clear about why, who is picking up what. The manager can ask, why are you picking this up? You can do a lot more. Why don't you take this? So these conversations will happen. And like I said, if you do an after action retrospective, reallocation will constantly happen. So there will be movement in the way tasks are done. Have I answered, Mahima? Otherwise, we can take this offline. Let's look at other questions as well. Milind Gogate says shared mental model is okay with routine situations. And you're saying during 2611, shared mental model ceased to exist the moment the team split into different locations. Milind, if you're still there, the shared mental model did not cease to exist. The shared mental model was the only thing that made that project a success. Shared mental model is nothing but everybody working together as if they have one brain. So they did not have, of course, they must have had certain standard operating procedures. But if you look at the VUCA state of that situation, nobody knew what exactly was happening inside the Taj. There were a lot of ambiguity in the information that was there. It was not crystal clear. So a standard operating procedure may not have worked, while it would have been a good guideline. But definitely everybody had a shared mental model of making this a success with minimum casualties of civilians and to close the project ASAP. So that was a shared mental model. And I'm sure that worked. So if you listen to Captain Raghuram's talk, you will be able to understand that. Milind, you have another question. Yes, you want to voice it? I think that's better.
Milind, you will have to unmute yourself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I did that. I
Yes.
did that. Okay, no, shared mental model, as I take it, I have also written that in the very next statement is extensive training for such contingencies and well-rehearsed SOPs that probably worked because all the teams, I mean, from the Black Cats and all other paramilitary forces, they split into different location. Nothing was known to nobody, and the mental model, the only model they knew as that, okay, I have to save collateral
Yes.
damage. That's it.
Yes.
And that's about it. And
Yes.
possibly they can catch hold of the terrorist perpetrators alive. If not alive, well, definitely shoot them. I mean, they neutralize them. Period.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that was the guideline.
Yes.
The model was because every situation was different, every location was different, every the amount of collateral damage involved was different. So none could have matched with the other. I mean, as we've seen, whether it is CST, whether it is Taj, whether it is Trident, whether it is Nariman House, you go to all four locations. They all four were classic, different locations, different situations. So only model probably. My only not objection, but my observation is that shared mental model. Model is, or you maybe call it shared guideline, that only that the ultimate aim was known to us. I mean, known to the team. That's about. So
Yeah.
and the next statement I've written in the chat, it says there's social quotient or emotional quotient. If your team has a very high degree of social and I mean EQ and SQ, probably this overload and people not picking up difficult tasks, probably that will be addressed if we built on the SQ and EQ part of it, along with TQ and IQ, technical and intelligence, of course. Thank you.
I must appreciate you've said it all. You started off with a question, but I think you've given the answer. Let's not get into the semantics of the word model. By model, what I only meant is, what is it that that is the only thing which is a common thread between in the minds of everybody in action there. And you're absolutely right. Although they had well rehearsed SOPs, when they were in action, nobody knew what was happening in the place because there was no clear information and no information was 100% accurate. They all went by what they felt was right in that moment of time. And they went ahead with just one goal, like you said, no casualty, free the hostages, and grab the terrorists. That's it. And they had to do it ASAP. That's all. And obviously, intercommunication was not possible, right? So definitely, the shared mental model was to achieve this goal ASAP. That's all. So if they could do it in that crisis situation, we should be able to do it in a comfortable work situation. Now, how they could do it is every one of them trusted that every commando there, every paramilitary person there, everyone in the army is going to do his or her best. There was so much of a trust in that team when they worked together. No one was trying to pull each other down. No one had even the time to play politics. That's the mental model. The goal, and the goal. That's it. So that is the shared mental model. Probably the word model is a kind of confusing, but yeah, but thanks. This was a good, interesting discussion point that you brought up. Yeah, Peter, do you have any other question that you would like to voice out or read from that? I'm trying to break the monotony here. While the poll is happening, I saw a very interesting point that Sahil Nair has made about why the shared mental model worked in that situation in 2611. He says the model works because life is at stake, unlike the corporate world. And Anuja is agreeing to Sahil, and so will everyone else, me too. But the point I'm trying to make is, if people start thinking or giving the ultimate deliverable importance of at least as much as importance that we would give to life, because our performance is measured, or the organization's performance is going to be measured, or our credibility is going to be measured by what we deliver. Now, if we start thinking that my credibility as a professional is as good as my life, and that's how we define passion, right? If we start thinking of it like that, and if we start thinking of the organization's credibility as saving the nation, why not? Shared mental models will work. It's only that sometimes we start putting, we start taking things a little casual, saying, ultimately, office ka kaam hai na, jaan thodi na ja rahi hai. It's that attitude. If we start changing it, it might work. Manipulations don't work in the line of fire. Manipulations don't work anywhere, Sahil.
So there's one question that we have from Dr. VLN. How
Yes.
to map peer learning in remote teams?
Dr. Vemuri, yes. How to map peer learning in remote teams. Is Dr. Vemuri there? I would love it if you're able to elaborate your question, sir. Peter, can you see him?
Vinay-
Otherwise,
Vinay has raised his hands.
Oh, sorry. Actually, I'm present.
yes.
Yeah, peer learning. Actually, what I'm just thinking is the skill set in some of the organizations are is mixed scenario now.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody is doing every kind of an activity, or maybe there are some kind of a differentiation is invisible. I mean, it's not visible because the challenges in terms of the deliverables. So when the deliverables become the more or a strict sense, if that is the scenario, are we learning from the peers? Are we just started acting as per the given instructions, or maybe with our own intuitive, are we doing some activities?
Okay.
That's my challenge.
Okay. That's the reason I wanted you to elaborate, because I was a little confused with your question. So in a remote team working, you're saying, are we able to efficiently leverage on learning from peers, or are we going blindly in our own track, right? That was what you're saying. There is a possibility of individuals going on their own track when you're working remotely, when communication within the team members doesn't happen. Now, I've seen that as classic examples in teams that I'm really helping to work remotely. One of the things that I strongly recommend to them as a practice is get into quick communication, quick, short, crisp communication. That's where the daily stand-up helps. So in a daily stand-up, it's not more than 10 minutes, but everybody comes together at some common time, discusses what happened, what are their plans today, what are they going to achieve today, do we need support, do we need to leverage on each other's learnings. For example, there were two regions in one large company who had exactly the same kind of problems. One of them actually cracked a solution. And if the daily stand-up was not happening, the other team would have struggled trying to reinvent the wheel. Now, in the daily stand-up, there was an opportunity for the person who cracked the solution to share it with the team, and the other person had to just replicate it. So peer learning will happen. Leveraging peer power will happen if we have the communication thread intact. In remote learning, in remote working, when we talk of shared mental model, it all means that everyone works as if the brain is only one, which means that communication channels have to be absolutely strong and at the right time. That's why I said it does not matter what medium, but right time. I'm talking of a company which has blue-collared workforce on the field. The only way this team can do a stand-up meeting every day is using smartphones. And many of their blue-collar workers don't even have smartphones. So they figure out some way in which they can get them to talk, or at least get representatives to talk. So medium does not really matter, but the timing and communication, how it goes, how it flows, and what's communicated is important. So peer learning can be leveraged. Mahima had raised her hand, and Vinay has a question.
Yeah, even Vinay has raised his hand.
Yes, Vinay. Vinay?
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
So I had a point to make, and I also had a question.
Yes.
When I don't know why we overcomplicate things as soon as we use the word corporate or professional. End of the day, we are all human beings dealing with human beings, right? If we go back to our moral science classes in school, which we never concentrated on, there's a lot that common sense can help us achieve when it comes to supporting each other, mental health, or ensuring that the teams work well. Somehow, we've got this mental line in our heads that professional means you only do if it's being paid for, you only do if you're asked to, you only work if there is a requirement, so on and so forth, versus all other things that we do in our personal lives. So that's something that all of us need to come out of that mentality to start doing. The question that I really had was this peer learning. While you did say, now I may be going out on lunch with my colleague, and while I'm walking in the corridor, I may have a conversation that'll teach me something. That's become really difficult and scarce to have in an online version, because we suddenly tend to become slightly more formal in our conversations, and as much as we say this time is dedicated to have conversation for this, it's more of we're not just having, hey, come, let's just go for a walk and just catch up, right? That catch up is missing, and that is definitely creating a huge impact on social learning, which is one of critical aspects in peer learning. So do you have any tricks for that in mind?
I can't think of that in any other way other than just picking up the phone and talking, not waiting for a formal invitation. Any other informal mode of communication serves pretty much that purpose. For example, I have some people with whom I collaborate regularly, and no matter what, we would communicate and stay in touch on WhatsApp, just talking about emotions or feelings we are going through when there is a situation, so if there's something which is very frustrating, I would just drop in a message to this friend. Okay. Similarly, I would receive messages from people. So what happens is there is a constant venting out of those frustrations. There is a constant sharing of those spurts of success, happiness, etc., which eventually becomes an informal conversation. So it's as good as walking over to somebody, putting your hand around their shoulder and going for a tea break. It's almost as good as that. But if we wait for a meeting to be set up, or if we wait for that designated co-working space, then we will sit across the video communication platform and talk about the day. By the time those spontaneous communications and spontaneous leveraging of each other's experiences is lost. So I would say if we are using informal platforms for forwarding messages, might as well use it for real meaningful conversations.
So we do that with our colleagues, as in our team members, and I'm really not talking for myself, but really as a larger problem. Now, if I'm in office, I'm also collaborating, or I'm also meeting somebody from marketing. I'm meeting somebody from say finance. I'm meeting somebody from operations. Right now, remote working, that's never going to happen unless there's no reason for you to talk. But because you're crossing each other and just exchanging pleasantries, you might as well talk about something. And so it's really that social learning formula, right? A marketing guy is not going to call up a techie saying, "Hey, what's up? How is your development happening?" Even if just like that you want to talk, right? So that social learning, I somehow find it is challenging for a lot of people. People like you and me, we are over communicative, so we anyways will talk to a lot of people.
Yeah. So first of all, Sahil Nair is going to charge you royalty for saying just like that. Okay. So he's constantly watching anyone who says just like that.
I specifically use for Sahil.
Yeah. So you said it right, Vinay. When there are teams people from different functions we've all started working siloed over the years. HR will talk to HR at the most to our stakeholders. HR and finance typically will not talk to each other. All these silos have happened. But I think this is an opportunity to put some conscious effort and break those silos. When we are talking about these multidisciplinary teams, which are customer centric, I have no choice but to develop collaborative friendship or camaraderie with people in different functions.
Sure.
So when I'm working towards a goal, when I'm working in a customer-centric manner, anything that happens in my conversation or interaction with that client, I will quickly discuss with someone else with whom I'm going to leverage that support. So a little bit of conscious thinking on having these conversations, impromptu sharing of feelings, emotions, what we go through with the right kind of people at the right time will take us there. Of course, it is not very easy. That will happen overnight. It's a big mindset change. It's a big behavioral change. But again, if we are thinking of the ultimate goal of working as a team, delivering that final outcome, I think we'll all get there. I am very much an introvert, but believe me, in this pandemic, I have made maximum number of friends, and I know most of you. That's because of an effort I made because I wanted to get somewhere. So I think it's all about putting that effort.
Sure. Thank you.
That extra edge that we talk of, trying to connect with all.
Yeah. So Ritesh is agreeing with Sahil on talk on things that are common matters. Yes, of course. Yeah, Vinay also agrees. Yes. What else do we have? Mahima had raised her hand now.
Yeah, Mahima,
does she have another question?
Inside the room.
Can you mute me? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, Mahima.
Mute, so I couldn't. So Harini ma'am, I had a question. So when we are working remotely in the teams, so there have been a lot of trust issues, and this situation have been like, you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. So how to avoid those situations? While working in office, we could easily connect together, and then the issues were. However, a lot of conflict issues have. How to manage those?
I think if you want to really see the secret sauce behind remote teams working very well is trust. Okay, there's no doubt about it. And what we're talking right now is how to make trust work efficiently. The only way to make trust work efficiently is by being transparent. So if people start short-circuiting communication, transparency is lost. No one can do anything about such teams, and no one can really bring in the productivity that we wish. But as long as there is transparency,
can you
as long
elaborate
as
on short-circuiting?
Short-circuiting in the sense, not keeping everybody concerned in the loop when you have to communicate something, telling someone the whole picture and then parallelly talking to someone.
Harini ma'am, I lost you. Okay.
Mahima, I think there's some problem with your side of the network, but or maybe it's mine. So I'll try and repeat. So short-circuiting, when I say short-circuiting, I meant when communication channels are not clear and complete, right? When communication goes a little round and about with some people and someone else parallelly is told some other information, full information is not communicated, then two people end up doing the same thing or there is a gap. Now, all these are short circuits in communication. So then things they don't get done. And then you end up seeing behaviors where somebody is trying to pull the other person down, so on and so forth. So rather than looking at why these people are demonstrating those behaviors, I think it's a good idea to look at what is driving those behaviors. Now, when you look at that, you will notice that that's because transparency in communication is lacking somewhere. That's why the short circuiting is happening, and therefore these behaviors. So if you build in transparency, so when transparency in communication means the right communication at the right time, irrespective of the medium, like I said, the right communication at the right time means transparency and to the right people. So once you do that, there shouldn't be a problem, because even if there is, it will be out there in the open. If someone wants to really challenge you for something and is really angry with you for something, it'll be right there in the open. Then obviously the manager as a facilitator has to play a role there and ease out those differences. But the problem is we are trying to use the same model that we did when we were working together in the same office. We're trying to put the same model in a remote working. That won't work. That's why we're running into trouble at times.